The November morning sun cut through the Manhattan skyline, its golden rays glinting off the glass towers that loomed over Fifth Avenue like sentinels of wealth. In 2025, New York pulsed with a restless energy protests over data privacy flared. In Union Square, electric cars hummed through the streets, and the divide between the city's elite and its everyday dreamers felt wider than ever. Outside Bergdorf Goodman, a crowd of shoppers parted like a wave around a gleaming red Ferrari SF90 Stradale. Its carbon fiber curves, a masterpiece of engineering, parked brazenly on the curb. Every eye was drawn to it, but only one pair of hands dared to touch its sacred surface. That single act would ignite a collision of worlds, exposing raw prejudice, hidden brilliance, and the faint spark of an improbable love story. James Carter, 38, stood sixth row in a bespoke navy brioni suit, his dark blonde hair swept back with precision, his green eyes sharp with the cold calculation of a man who'd built a $15 billion tech empire. At the helm of Carter Tech, a company revolutionizing artificial intelligence for social media analytics, he was a titan in a city of giants. But today, his focus wasn't on the looming board meeting or the backlash against his company's latest data mining algorithm, which had sparked protests over privacy violations. Instead, his gaze lingered on his most prized possession, the Ferrari, one of only 5 custom models in the world, its hybrid V8 engine a symphony of power and precision. To James, it was more than a car, it was his sanctuary, a shield against the emptiness of a penthouse filled with everything except connection. He'd learned early that wealth was a double-edged sword. It bought him the world but left him isolated, surrounded by people who saw his bank account before his soul. At 16, he'd lost his father to a sudden stroke, a man who taught him to love the roar of engines and the grit of a wrench. The memory of his father's 1969 Mustang, sold by his mother weeks after the funeral, still stung like a fresh wound. The Ferrari was his rebellion against loss, a monument to control in a life where trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. His phone buzzed with a notification from a dating app, another match, another woman chasing his fortune. With a flick of his thumb, he deleted it, his jaw tightening. Connection, it seemed, was the one thing his billions couldn't buy. Across the city, in the gritty hum of Long Island City, Queens, the clatter of tools echoed through Thompson Auto Restoration. Leela Thompson, 28, slid out from beneath a silver Aston Martin DB11, her coffee-brown skin dusted with the honest grime of her trade. Her natural curls were tucked into a practical bun, and her bright red coveralls bore the stains of a morning spent wrestling a faulty transmission into submission. At 5'6", she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned every inch of her reputation. Her father, a Brooklyn mechanic, had called her hands magic, and as she wiped them on a rag, she felt his presence in the purr of the Aston's revived engine. The car's owner, a tech mogul, would never know that the woman who'd saved his $250,000 investment had learned her craft in a one-car garage, surrounded by neighbors who brought their beat-up sedans to her father's shop. Lila was no ordinary mechanic. She was the mechanic, the one called when Lamborghinis limped, when Bugattis broke, when Ferraris needed miracles. Her client list sparkled with names, athletes, actors, CEOs, but few knew her face or her story. In a world that often dismissed her because of her gender or race, she built a kingdom of tools and skill, where vintage Ferrari posters lined the walls and every wrench had its place. But success came at a cost. Dating was a minefield. Men either shrank from her expertise or exoticized it. She'd learned to guard her heart as fiercely as she guarded her workshop, trusting only her craft and her best friend Mia, who texted her to meet for their monthly lunch at a Manhattan cafe. As Lila stepped out into the crisp November air, the scent of roasted chestnuts mingling with exhaust, She changed into a sapphire blue sweater and dark jeans, her movements quick and purposeful. Manhattan hummed around her, 8 million stories unfolding in parallel, unaware that two lives were about to crash into each other with the force of a revelation. Fifth Avenue was a parade of wealth, its storefronts glittering with promise. Lila's eyes scanned the familiar chaos tourists snapping photos, protesters waving signs about data privacy, and the occasional supercar cutting through traffic. Then she saw it. The Ferrari's F90 Stradale, parked like a crown jewel in front. OF Bergdorf Goodman. Its deep red paint seemed to pulse under the sunlight. A hybrid masterpiece that married a twin-turbo V8 with 3 electric motors, delivering 986 horsepower of raw artistry. Lila stopped, her breath catching. She'd worked on Ferraris before, but this was different, a custom model. Its carbon fiber spoiler, hand-shaped. Its gold brake calipers, a bespoke flourish. Unable to resist, she stepped closer, her fingers grazing the hood, feeling the faint warmth of the engine beneath. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice reverent, as if standing before a cathedral. She knelt to inspect the air intakes, noting the precision of the design. "This is a work of art," she murmured, tracing the aerodynamic curves. Her mind raced with technical details. The hybrid system's complexity, the balance of power, the sheer audacity of its engineering. For a moment, the world faded, until a voice sliced through her all like a blade. "Excuse me. What the hell do you think you're doing?" Lila looked up to see a tall man in a navy suit storming toward her, his green eyes blazing with fury. James Carter had just exited Bergdorf Goodman after a tense call with his lawyer about the data privacy backlash. His mood was already sour when he spotted someone touching his Ferrari. When he saw it was a young black woman in casual clothes. Every stereotype his privileged upbringing had ingrained surged to the surface. "Get your hands off my car," he shouted, his voice echoing across the sidewalk, drawing stares from passersby. "Do you have any idea what you're touching?" Lila stood, raising her hands in a calming gesture. "I'm sorry, I was just admiring it. It's an incredible machine." "Admiring?" James's voice dripped with condescension as he closed the distance, towering over her. "This is a Ferrari SF90 Stradale, one of 5 in the world. The carbon fiber alone is worth more than most people's houses. You shouldn't be anywhere near it." The words hit Lila like a slap, familiar yet stinging. She'd faced this before: assumptions. That her appearance meant ignorance, that she didn't belong in the world of luxury or expertise. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her voice steady. "Sir, I wasn't trying to damage anything. I was appreciating the craftsmanship. I can see the custom modifications, the upgraded suspension, the bespoke interior." James laughed, a harsh sound that carried no humor. "Oh, really? Watched a few car shows, so you think you're an expert?" The racist undertone wasn't lost on the growing crowd, some shifting uncomfortably, though no one intervened. This was Manhattan, where spectacle was entertainment, and confrontation was someone else's problem. Lila's hands clenched at her sides. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to preserve her dignity. But something about his smug certainty ignited a spark of defiance. "Actually," she said, her voice sharp as steel, "I can see 3 issues with your car that you clearly haven't noticed. Your brake fluid reservoir is low. Look at how it's sitting. The left rear tire has uneven wear, suggesting an alignment problem. And that discoloration around the exhaust? Your hybrid system's calibration is off. But I'm sure a man who really knows cars would have caught that." For a heartbeat, James was speechless, his confidence faltering. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. The screen flashed Elite Auto Services, the shop that maintained his collection. "What?" he barked, still glaring at Lila. "Mr. Carter, it's urgent," came the voice of the service manager. Your Ferraris, showing critical alerts, a hybrid calibration issue that could destroy the engine. We need our specialist there now. How soon can they be here? James asked, his voice tight. She's in Manhattan already. Her name's Layla Thompson. She's the only one we trust with a car like this. The phone slipped from James's hand, clattering to the pavement. He stared at Lila, his world tilting as her calm, knowing gaze met his. She bent down, picked up his phone, and handed it back with a gentleness that belied the storm in her eyes. That would be me, she said softly. The crowd began to disperse, sensing the drama's peak had passed. But for James and Lila, this was only the beginning. The Ferrari stood gleaming between them, a silent witness to a moment that would unravel every assumption, ignite a spark of possibility, and set two hearts on a collision course towards something extraordinary. The hum of Manhattan faded as the elevator ascended to the 42nd floor of James Carter's penthouse, a glass and steel fortress overlooking a city that never slept. Inside the private garage, a cathedral of automotive perfection, 5 gleaming supercars stood like silent sentinels under specialized LED lights. The air smelled faintly of polished metal and motor oil, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury of the penthouse above. James stood by the Ferrari SF90 Stradale, its scarlet, hood still warm from the morning's drive, his mind reeling from the encounter on Fifth Avenue. Lila Thompson, the woman he berated for touching his car, was now on her way to fix it. The irony was a bitter pill, and his pride a fortress built on years of unchallenged privilege bristled at the thought. Lila stepped out of the elevator. Her sapphire sweater swapped for red coveralls, a heavy black tool bag slung over her shoulder. Her dark eyes scanned the garage with the precision of a master craftsman, cataloging the hydraulic lifts, the snap-on diagnostic station, and the rows of tools that gleamed like surgical instruments. She nodded approvingly, her professional instincts overriding the sting of James's earlier words. Nice setup, she said, setting her bag down with a thud. Most private garages are for show. This is functional. James shifted uncomfortably, his navy Brioni suit feeling out of place in his own sanctuary. I designed it myself, he said, his voice tighter than he intended. I used to work on cars before the company took over. The admission carried a faint note of nostalgia, a glimpse of the boy who'd once tinkered alongside his father, but he quickly buried it. He wasn't ready to let her see that side of him, not yet. Lila didn't respond, her focus already on the Ferrari. She pulled a sleek diagnostic device from her bag, its screen glowing with data as she connected it to a port beneath the dashboard. The garage filled with a soft hum of electronic analysis, screens lighting up with engine parameters and system, integration maps that looked like something out of a sci-fi film. James watched, transfixed despite himself. Her movements were precise, economical, each gesture a testament to years of expertise. Your hybrid controller's off by 12%, she said, her voice steady as she read the display. The electric motors aren't syncing with the V8. Keep driving like this, and you'll blow the powertrain in a week. James blinked, his business brain scrambling to process her words. How long to fix it? He asked, defaulting to the timelines that governed his boardroom. Could be an hour, could be 6, Lila replied, not looking up. Depends on what I find. This needs a proper facility, either my workshop in Queens or here, if your equipment's up to par. She glanced around, assessing the garage again. Looks like you've got everything I need. My garage is state-of-the-art, James said, a hint of his earlier arrogance creeping back. Built for my collection. He gestured to the other cars, a Lamborghini Aventador, a McLaren P1, a vintage Porsche 911 Turbo, each a monument to his success. Lila raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Good, then I'll drive the car here myself. In its current condition, It shouldn't be on the road without a professional behind the wheel. You want to drive my Ferrari? The words slipped out before James could stop them, laced with disbelief. He caught the tightening of Lila's jaw, the flicker of hurt in her eyes, and instantly regretted it. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I've driven cars worth more than your entire collection. Last month, I test drove a Koenigsegg Jesko after rebuilding its gearbox. 2 weeks ago, it was a Bugatti Chiron Persport. Your Ferrari doesn't scare me." She held out her hand. "Keys." James hesitated, his pride warring with the reality of her expertise. Her steady gaze didn't waver, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his assumptions pressing against him. He placed the key fob in her palm, their fingers brushing briefly, sending an unexpected jolt through him. Lila seemed unaffected, sliding into the driver's seat with the ease of someone born to it. The engine roared to life, a controlled thunder that filled the garage. She adjusted the mirrors, checked the gauges, and rolled down the window. "I assume you can find your own way back," she said, her tone professional but edged with challenge. "Of course," James muttered, feeling foolish as he watched her pull the Ferrari smoothly toward the elevator that would lower it to the street. The car disappeared, carrying with it a woman who'd already begun to unravel his carefully constructed world. The drive to Queens was a blur for James, his mind replaying the scene on Fifth Avenue. He'd assumed Lila was ignorant, a trespasser in his world of wealth and precision. Yet she'd seen flaws in his Ferrari that he, with all his resources, had missed. The realization gnawed at him, a crack in the armor of his self-assuredness. By the time he reached his building, the Ferrari was already parked in the underground entrance, Lila standing beside it, her diagnostic equipment laid out like a surgeon's tools. She was on the phone, her voice crisp as she discussed parts with someone named Marcus. "I need the spare hybrid controller from the shop," she said. "This one's firmware is shot." James approached, his polished shoes clicking on the concrete. "How bad is it?" he asked, trying to regain some semblance of control. Lila ended her call and turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Bad enough that you're lucky I was here. The hybrid system's calibration is causing voltage spikes. You've been driving it like a drag racer, haven't you?" Her tone was matter-of-fact, but the accusation stung. "I may have pushed it," James admitted, his cheeks flushing. "It's a performance car. It's a precision instrument," Lila corrected, her eyes narrowing. "You treat it like a toy, you lose it. This isn't just about money. It's about respect for what it is." She opened the hood, revealing the Ferrari's mechanical heart, and began connecting her diagnostic cables. "I'll need a few hours to confirm the issue. You can stay or go. Your choice." James stayed. He told himself it was about protecting his investment, but deep down, he was drawn to her confidence, her command of a world he'd once loved but had abandoned for boardrooms and balance sheets. As Lila worked, he found himself asking, almost against his will, "How did you get into this? Fixing cars like these?" Lila paused, her hand stilling on a connector. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, "My father. He ran a small garage in Brooklyn, nothing like this." She gestured to the pristine garage. "He fixed whatever people drove, from rusty Hondas to delivery vans. He taught me that every engine has a story, and if you listen, it tells you what it needs." James leaned against the workbench, intrigued despite himself. "He must be proud of you." "He would have been," Lila said softly, her eyes distant. "He died when I was 22. Heart attack. Never saw me work on my first Ferrari." She resumed her work, her movements deliberate. "He always said I had magic hands. Sometimes when I'm deep in an engine like this, I feel him guiding me." The intimacy of her confession caught James off guard. He'd expected defiance, not vulnerability. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. My father died when I was 16. Stroke. He loved cars too. Taught me to change the oil in his Mustang. I haven't touched a wrench since I started chasing money instead of engines. Lila glanced up, her dark eyes studying him. Sounds like you lost more than just him. Her words hit harder than he expected, stirring memories of late nights in his father's garage, the smell of grease, the laughter over a stubborn bolt. He pushed the thought away, uncomfortable with the vulnerability it exposed. So, what's wrong with the car? He asked, redirecting the conversation. Lila pointed to a screen showing a jagged voltage graph. The hybrid controller's firmware is corrupted. It's not syncing the electric motors with the V8 properly. Could be from aggressive driving or a bad software update. Either way, it's a delicate fix. She looked at him pointedly. You're lucky I got to it before it fried the whole system. James nodded, his respect for her growing despite the stubborn remnants of his pride. You're good at this, he said, the words feeling inadequate. I'm the best, Lila replied. Not arrogantly, but with the quiet certainty of someone who'd fought for every ounce of recognition. That's why your service manager called me. But most of my clients don't know my name. They just know their cars run when I'm done. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen, a faint smile crossing her face. That's Marcus, my assistant. He's bringing the spare controller. She paused, then added, he's also my best friend. Keeps me sane in this industry. James felt a pang of something unfamiliar envy, perhaps for the ease of her connection with someone else. His own friendships were transactional, built on power plays and mutual gain. Must be nice, he said, then caught himself. Having someone like that, I mean. Lila's smile faded slightly. It is, but it's not enough to fill the gaps. She returned to her work, her focus absolute, but her words lingered, hinting at a loneliness that mirrored his own. As the diagnostic screens flickered, casting blue light across the garage, James's phone buzzed with an urgent email from his board. The subject line read, Singapore deal. Privacy concerns escalate. The $200 million acquisition was teetering, with investors spooked by protests over Carter-Tech's data practices. He ignored it, his attention fixed on Lila. For the first time in years, the chaos of his empire felt less urgent than the woman before him, her hands moving with surgical precision, her presence challenging every assumption he'd held. Outside, Manhattan glittered under a November sky, oblivious to the shift unfolding 42 floors above. Lila's tools clinked softly, a rhythm of expertise and defiance, while James stood on the edge of something he couldn't yet name, a realization that the woman he dismissed might hold the key to more than just his Ferrari salvation. The penthouse garage, a temple of gleaming metal and precision tools, felt smaller now, its pristine white walls closing in as James Carter watched Lila Thompson work. The Ferrari SF90 Stradale, its hood open like a mechanical heart, hummed softly. Under the glow of LED lights, its diagnostic screens casting blue shadows across Lila's focused face. It was past 7 p.m. on that November evening in 2025, and Manhattan's skyline sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glittering reminder of the world James had mastered, but never truly understood. The air carried the faint tang of motor oil and the quiet rhythm of Alicia Keys' voice, streaming from Lila's phone through the garage's sound system. The music softened the edges of the space, creating an unexpected intimacy that made James's carefully constructed defenses feel fragile. Lila knelt beside the Ferrari, her hands moving with surgical precision as she disconnected a wiring harness. "Hand me the number 8 Torx driver," she said, her voice steady but warm, as if the music had loosened something in her. James, still in his wrinkled Brioni suit, hesitated before selecting the tool from her meticulously organized kit. Their fingers brushed as he passed it to her, a fleeting contact that sent a jolt through him, stirring emotions he hadn't felt in years. "You're getting the hang of this," Lila observed, her eyes fixed on the engine. "Most clients just hover and complain about the weight." James settled onto a rolling stool beside the car, watching her work with a fascination he couldn't suppress. "I forgot how satisfying this is," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "Fixing something with your hands. I used to do this with my dad, tinker, rebuild, listen to the engine talk. Haven't touched a tool in, God, probably a decade." Lila glanced up, her dark eyes catching the vulnerability in his tone. "Sounds like you miss it," she said, her voice softening. "What happened?" James leaned back, his gaze drifting to a vintage racing poster on the wall, a black and white image of Juan Manuel Fangio crossing the finish line at Monaco in 1957. "Life happened," he said, his words heavy with old pain. "My dad died when I was 16. Stroke. One day we were rebuilding a carburetor in his Mustang. The next he was gone. My mom sold the car 3 weeks later, said it was too painful to keep. But for me, it was the only thing that still felt like him." He paused, surprised by his own candor. "I promised myself I'd buy cars no one could take away. Cars that would last forever." Lila's hands stilled on the wiring harness, her expression softening. "That's why this Ferrari means so much to you," she said, not as a question, but a realization. "It's not just about the money." James nodded, his throat tight. "It's about control. Everything in my life, employees, relationships, even my mom, who remarried and moved to Europe, feels temporary. These cars." He gestured to the Ferrari, the Lamborghini, the Porsche. "They stay. They don't leave." The confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded. And for the first time in years, James felt seen not as a billionaire CEO, but as a man carrying a boy's grief. Lila set the Torx driver down, her movements thoughtful. "I get it," she said quietly. "My dad was my world, too. He ran a tiny garage in Brooklyn, nothing fancy, just oil changes and brake jobs for the neighborhood. But he taught me to listen to engines, to hear their stories. When he died, I thought I'd lose that connection. But every time I fix a car, it's like he's still here, guiding my hands." She smiled faintly, a mix of pride and sorrow. "He never told me I couldn't do this because I was a girl. That was his gift to me." James felt a pang of admiration, tinged with shame for his earlier assumptions. "He sounds like a hell of a man," he said. "You're carrying his legacy." "I try," Lila said, her voice catching slightly. "But it's not easy. This industry." She gestured to the garage, a microcosm of her world. "It's a boys' club. Always has been. After Dad died, I realized he'd shielded me from the worst of it, clients who wouldn't take me seriously, shops that wouldn't hire me because I didn't fit the profile. Even now I'm the best, but I'm still proving myself every damn day." James's chest tightened. He'd never had to prove himself that way. His wealth, his whiteness, his maleness had opened doors before he'd even knocked. "That's not fair," he said, the words feeling inadequate. Lila laughed, a sound with little humor. "Fair? Tell that to the dealership that turned me down for a contract last year because I lacked experience. I just rebuilt a McLaren P1 for a Grammy winner. But sure, I'm the one who's unqualified." She shook her head, her fingers resuming their work. "You learn to live with it. You have to be twice as good to get half the respect." Her phone buzzed on the workbench, and she glanced at the screen. A text from Marcus, *, just got a call. From Jaden Smith's team. They want you for his new Bugatti. You're killing it. Lila's lips curved into a small smile, but she didn't mention it. James noticed, though, and felt a flicker of curiosity. "Good news?" he asked. "Just work," she said, brushing it off. Another client who'll never know my name. Just that their car runs like a dream. She adjusted a connector, her focus returning to the Ferrari. This controller's the issue. See this? She pointed to a screen showing a voltage spike. It's like the car's heart is beating out a rhythm. I need to reprogram the firmware, but it's delicate. One wrong move, and the whole system crashes. James leaned closer, drawn into her explanation despite himself. Like an orchestra with a bad conductor, he said, echoing her earlier metaphor. Lila's eyes flicked to his, a spark of surprise in them. Exactly. You've been listening. I'm trying, James said, and he meant it. Her knowledge, her passion, was dismantling his assumptions piece by piece. He built an empire on artificial intelligence, but he barely understood the hybrid technology powering his own car. Lila, with her grease-stained coveralls and unyielding confidence, was a master in a way he'd never been. You make it sound alive, he said, gesturing to the Ferrari. It is, Lila replied, her voice warm with conviction. Every engine has a personality. This one's a diva demanding, but worth it when you get it right. She paused, her hand stilling. Again, my ex didn't get that. Thought I was crazy for talking to cars like they could hear me. James seized the opening, sensing a chance to know her better. Your ex? Another mechanic? Lila's expression tightened, but she answered. Yeah, we dated 3 years ago. Thought he saw me for me, not just the novelty of a woman who could rebuild a transmission. Turns out he was taking credit for my work, telling clients he was the expert and I was just his helper. Her voice grew quieter. I felt so stupid for trusting him. Since then, I keep things simple: work, friends, no complications. Safer that way. Lonely, though, James said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He knew that. Loneliness, the kind that came from walls built too high to scale. Lila met his gaze, her eyes searching his. Yeah, she admitted softly. Lonely safer than betrayed. The music shifted to a slower Alicia Keys track, its soulful notes filling the garage with a warmth that felt almost tangible. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their shared confession settling between them like a fragile bridge. James felt an urge to say more, to tell her about the women who chased his wealth, the board members who saw him as a means to an end, the mother who'd left for a new life in Geneva. But his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. An email from his coup. Asterisk. Protesters are outside HQ. Singapore deal's at risk if we don't address the data privacy issue now. Asterisk. James ignored it, his focus locked on Lila. Can I ask you something? He said, emboldened by the music and her. Candor, when you're working on a car like this, do you ever feel like you're talking to it? Lila's face lit up, a genuine smile breaking through her guarded exterior. All the time, she said. My dad used to say the same thing about his old Chevy. Said he could hear when something was wrong before it showed up on any diagnostic. Machines don't lie. They tell you exactly what they need, if you know how to listen. My dad said that too, James replied, his voice tinged with wonder. About his Mustang. I thought he was crazy, but now, he gestured to the Ferrari, to her. I get it. Lila's smile softened, and for a moment, their eyes held a connection born not of wealth or status, but of shared loss and a love for the mechanical hearts that had shaped them. Not everyone does, she said. Most people see cars like this as status symbols. But you get why they matter. James felt something shift inside him, a crack in the wall he built around his heart. I used to, he said quietly. Somewhere along the way, I forgot. Got caught up in all this. He waved a hand at the garage, the penthouse, the life he'd built. You're reminding me what it feels like to care about something real. Lila's hands resumed their work, but her expression was softer now, less guarded. Careful, Carter, she teased, a playful edge to her voice. "You're starting to sound human." He laughed, the sound foreign in his own ears. When was the last time he'd laughed without calculation, without an agenda? "Maybe you're rubbing off on me," he said, and the words carried a weight neither of them was ready to name. As Lila dove back into the Ferrari's wiring, James watched, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Her skill, her resilience, her refusal to shrink under his earlier hostility. They challenged everything he believed about himself and the world. Outside, Manhattan churned with its endless dramas, protests, deals, power plays. But in this garage, 42 floors above the city, two people were beginning to see each other, not as adversaries, but as mirrors of their own hidden wounds. The Ferrari's engine hummed softly, a silent witness to a moment that felt like the start of something neither could yet define. The penthouse garage, once a sanctuary of shared vulnerability, now pulsed with a different energy, tense, fragile, and teetering on the edge of collapse. The Ferrari SF90 Stradale, its engine compartment still open, glowed under the LED lights, its diagnostic screens displaying a steady rhythm of repaired systems. Lila Thompson, her red coverall smudged with honest work, stood beside the car, her fingers flying across her laptop as she finalized the hybrid controller's programming. James Carter, his tie loosened and suit jacket discarded, hovered nearby, his green eyes fixed on her with a mix of admiration and something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name. It was 9:30 p.m. on that November night in 2025, and outside, Manhattan's skyline glittered, indifferent to the human drama unfolding 42 floors above. The soft strains of Alicia Keys had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the garage's diagnostic equipment and the distant honk of taxis below. Lila glanced at the screen, her voice steady but warm. "The programming's almost done. Another 10 minutes, and your Ferrari will be good as new, better, even." She looked up at James, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You might actually get to that board meeting tonight." James returned, the smile, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "Thanks to you," he said, his voice carrying a sincerity that surprised him. "I don't know how to repay you for this." "You don't," Lila said simply, her eyes meeting his. "Just don't yell at anyone else for touching your car." The playful edge in her tone masked the weight of their earlier confrontation, but James felt it a reminder of his shame, and a chance to be better. Before he could respond, the sharp ping of the elevator shattered the moment. Voices echoed from the penthouse's main living area, brash and commanding, cutting through the garage's intimacy like a blade. "Carter, where the hell are you? We need to talk about Singapore." The words were laced with impatience, and James's face paled. "That's Edward Harris," he muttered, his posture stiffening. "And the board. They weren't supposed to be here until tomorrow." Lila's hands paused on her laptop, her heart quickening with a sudden unease. "Should I go?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "No," James said quickly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. "Just let me handle this." But even as he spoke, Lila saw the transformation. The man who'd shared his grief over his father's Mustang was retreating, replaced by the cold, controlled CEO she'd met on Fifth Avenue. Three men in tailored suits strode into the garage, their polished shoes clicking on the marble floor. Edward Harris, James's business partner, and a silver-haired titan in his 50s, led the group, his sharp blue eyes scanning the scene with barely concealed disdain. Behind him were two board members, Richard Lee and Thomas Grayson, their expressions a mix of irritation and entitlement. The air shifted, heavy with the weight of their expectations. Well, Edward drawled, his gaze flicking from James to Lila. "No wonder you've been dodging our calls all evening." James straightened, his voice tight. "Edward, this is Lila Thompson. She's the mechanic fixing my Ferrari." He gestured to the car, but his tone lacked the warmth it had held moments ago. The mechanic? Edward's eyebrows shot up, his tone dripping with condescension. It's nearly 10 o'clock, Carter. Surely this maintenance issue could have waited for normal hours. He didn't look at Lila, his dismissal of her as palpable as a physical shove. Lila felt the familiar sting of being erased, her expertise reduced to an inconvenience. She focused on her laptop, saving the final lines of code with trembling fingers, determined to finish the job despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Actually, she said, her voice calm but firm, the programming's done. The car's fully operational now. She closed her laptop, the sharp click echoing in the suddenly silent garage. Richard Lee, a wiry man with a perpetual smirk, chuckled. Operational? It's just a car, sweetheart. Send it to the dealership tomorrow and let's focus on real business. His casual sexism hung in the air, and Lila's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Edward stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he addressed James. You're paying premium rates for this? He gestured vaguely at Lila, as if she were an object rather than a person. There are plenty of qualified mechanics who could have handled this during the day. This isn't the time for distractions, Carter. The Singapore deal's on the line $200 million, and the protesters are tearing us apart over the data privacy issue. James's face hardened, his earlier vulnerability buried under the weight of their judgment. The repair was complex, he said stiffly, avoiding Lila's gaze. It required extended time. Complex? Thomas Grayson snorted, adjusting his cufflinks. It's a car, not a rocket ship. What's next? Having the cleaning staff in here at midnight. The men laughed, a sound that grated against Lila's nerves like sandpaper. She stood, shouldering her tool bag with deliberate calm. The diagnostic will show all systems are operational, she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. You're welcome to test it yourself, Mr. Carter. The formal address was a knife, cutting through the fragile connection they'd built over hours of shared stories and quiet understanding. James flinched, his eyes finally meeting hers, but the man who'd laughed with her over engines was gone. Miss Thompson, he said, his voice clipped and clinical, thank you for your service. Please submit your invoice through the usual channels. The words landed like a betrayal, worse than his morning's anger because they were calculated, a retreat to the safety of his old self. Lila's heart twisted, the hope she dared to feel crumbling under the weight of his cowardice. She'd opened up to him, shared pieces of herself she'd guarded for years, and now he stood there, shrinking before his peers, reducing her to a transaction. Of course, Mr. Carter, she said, her tone matching his in its cold professionalism. She moved toward the elevator, each step measured, her dignity the only armor she had left. As she passed the three men, Edward stepped slightly into her path, his smile patronizing. In the future, young lady, he said, I'd suggest finishing automotive work during business hours. Mr. Carter has important responsibilities. Lila stopped, her dark eyes flashing with controlled fury. She turned to face him, her voice low but powerful. In the future, Mr. Harris, you might want to check who you're dismissing before you speak. Did you know your friend here called every major auto service in Manhattan today, and none could fix his Ferrari? Did you know this car is one of 5 in the world, and I'm one of 3 people on the East Coast certified to work on its hybrid system? She paused, letting her words sink in, her gaze shifting to James. Or that I've rebuilt engines for Formula One teams and restored classics for the Peterson Museum. I charge $500 an hour because I'm worth it. The silence was deafening. Edward sputtered, his face reddening, but Lila wasn't done. You saw a young black woman and assumed I didn't belong here, she continued, her voice steady as steel. But the only thing out of place is your ignorance. She turned to James, her eyes holding not just anger but the death of something. "Precious, the Ferrari's fixed, Mr. Carter. I hope it serves you well." She pressed the elevator button, her fingers steady despite the ache in her chest. As the doors opened, she faced them one last time. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice soft but piercing, "I thought you were different. I thought you'd learned something today about judging people by their cover. I was wrong." The doors closed with a whisper, leaving James standing in the hollow garage, the Ferrari's purr a cruel mockery of the connection he'd just shattered. Edward broke the silence, his tone dismissive. "Well, that was spirited. Can we focus on Singapore now? The protesters are killing us in the press." Richard nodded, checking his watch. "This whole evening's been a waste. Let's get to the deal." James barely heard them, his gaze fixed on the spot where Lila had stood. Her words echoed in his mind. "I thought you were different." He'd felt alive today, seen in a way he hadn't since his father's death, and he'd thrown it away to appease men whose approval he didn't even want. The Ferrari, now perfect, stood as a testament to Lila's brilliance and his failure. His phone buzzed another email about the Singapore deal, warning of investor pullouts over the data privacy scandal. He ignored it, his mind racing with the realization that he'd lost something far more valuable than a $200 million contract. "Brooks, you listening?" Edward snapped, his patience wearing thin. James turned to them, seeing them clearly for the first time. Edward's casual bigotry, Richard's smug entitlement, Thomas's blind ambition. These were the men he'd called allies, whose opinions he'd valued above a woman who'd shown him what it meant to be real. "Get out," he said, his voice low but firm. "What?" Edward blinked, incredulous. "Get out of my home." "All of you. Now." James's tone left no room for argument. He pressed the elevator button, his hand shaking with a mix of rage and regret. "Singapore can wait. This can't. James, what's gotten into you?" Edward demanded, but James was already moving toward the elevator, his mind fixed on one thing: finding Lila. He had to make this right, not with words or money, but with the kind of courage she'd shown him all day. As the elevator descended, the weight of his betrayal pressed down on him. He'd chosen safety over truth, fear over growth, and in doing so, he'd hurt the one person who'd seen past his wealth to the man beneath. The city lights blurred. Below, indifferent to his desperation. Lila was gone, but he wasn't giving up. Some mistakes could be undone, but only if he was willing to risk everything to prove he'd changed. The elevator's descent from the 42nd floor felt like a plunge into an abyss, each second stretching into eternity as James Carter paced the confined space. His disheveled hair, once meticulously styled, fell across his forehead and his navy Brioni suit bore the creases of a day that had unraveled his carefully curated life. It was 10:15 p.m. on November 12, 2025, and Manhattan's glittering skyline blurred beyond the glass, a city indifferent to the storm raging in James's chest. He'd betrayed Lila Thompson, the woman who'd seen past his wealth and arrogance, to the man he could be, and now she was gone, her final words echoing like a verdict. Asterisk, I thought you were different. I was wrong. Asterisk. The elevator doors opened into the marble lobby of his building, the air cool and sterile. James strode toward the night doorman, Eduardo, a kind-faced man who'd worked the desk for 15 years. Eduardo, the woman who left her. One in the gray sweatshirt, did you see where she went? His voice was urgent, almost pleading. Eduardo nodded, his expression concerned. The lady in the green sweater? She changed into a sweatshirt and took a taxi toward Queens about 10 minutes ago. Seemed upset, Mr. Carter. Everything okay? 10 minutes, James muttered, his heart sinking. In Manhattan's traffic, 10 minutes was a lifetime. He pulled out his phone, hands trembling as he scrolled through contacts that included senators and CEOs, but not the one name he needed: Lila Thompson. Think, he whispered to himself, then looked back at Eduardo. She works for Elite Auto Services. Do you have their number? Of course, sir. Eduardo tapped his computer, pulling up the directory. But it's past 10:30. They'll be closed. James was already dialing, his pulse racing. The phone rang 4 times before a tired voice answered. Elite Auto Emergency Line. This is Marcus. Marcus, it's James Carter. I need to reach Lila Thompson. It's urgent. His words tumbled out, raw with desperation. A pause. Carter? The Ferrari guy? Marcus's tone hardened. Man, what did you do to her? She just called me, crying, asking me to pick her up from the 74th and Roosevelt subway station in Queens. Lila never cries. The words hit James like a physical blow. Lila, the woman who'd faced his morning's rage with unshakable dignity, was crying because of him. Where is she? Please, I need to apologize. I need to make this right. Look, man, Marcus said, his voice low and protective. Lila's been hurt by enough rich guys who think they can treat her like she's disposable. Maybe you should. Leave her alone. No, you don't understand. James's voice broke, his usual composure shattered. I was wrong completely, inexcusably wrong. I let those men talk down to her, and I didn't stop them. But I think... He hesitated, the words feeling both absurd and undeniable. I think I'm falling in love with her. I can't let her think those men speak for me. Please, Marcus, tell me where she is. Another pause, longer this time. You're falling in love with her? Marcus's tone softened, but skepticism lingered. After one day? I know it sounds crazy, James said, his voice steadying with conviction. But she's brilliant. Strong, real, everything I didn't know I was missing. I threw that away because I was scared of what those men would think. Please, just give me a chance to fix this, Marcus sighed. She's at the 74th and Roosevelt station. I was about to pick her up, but I'll tell her my car broke down. You've got maybe 20 minutes. But Carter, if you hurt her again, I don't care how much money you have. We clear? Crystal, James said, relief flooding him. Thank you, Marcus. He hung up and turned to Eduardo. I need the Ferrari. Now. Right away, sir. Eduardo signaled for the car to be brought from the garage. As James waited, his phone buzzed with text from Edward Harris. Asterisk, what the hell was that? We need to talk. Singapore's worth $200 million. Don't let some woman mess this up. Asterisk. James stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. Without hesitation, he blocked Edward's number, then Richard's, then Thomas's. One by one, he erased the contacts of men who saw people like Lila as less than human. The Ferrari rolled up, its engine purring like a contented beast, a testament to Lila's skill. James slid behind the wheel, catching his reflection in the rearview mirror tie askew, eyes wild, a man stripped of pretense. He looked human, and for the first time, he wanted to be. The drive to Queens should have taken 45 minutes, but James made it in 25, the Ferrari's power eating up the distance as he wove through traffic. His mind raced faster than the car, rehearsing apologies that felt hollow against the magnitude of his betrayal. How do you apologize for proving you're the kind of man someone hoped you weren't? How do you ask for forgiveness when your cowardice has cut so deep? The 74th and Roosevelt subway station loomed ahead, its blue and orange signs glowing in the November night. James parked illegally, ignoring the risk of tickets. Money didn't matter now, only Lila did. She sat alone on a bench outside the station, her gray sweatshirt blending into the shadows, her shoulders slumped in a way that made James's chest ache. The confident woman who commanded his garage was gone, replaced by someone small, vulnerable, wounded. Her head was down, her tool bag at her feet, and the sight of her like this, because of him, was unbearable. He approached slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the concrete. Lila looked up, her dark eyes cycling through surprise, pain, and a defensive hardness that cut deeper than any anger. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was neutral, but exhaustion threaded through. I came to apologize," James said, his voice raw, "and to tell you I'm an idiot." She stood, shouldering her bag. "At least you got one thing right tonight. Marcus is coming. You should go back to your important friends and your important deal." "I told them to leave," James said, taking a cautious step closer. "All of them. Out of my home. Out of my life." Lila paused, her hand tightening on her bag strap. "What?" "I told them to get out," he repeated, his voice steadier now. "After you left, I stood there listening to them talk about Singapore, about money, like nothing else mattered. And I realized something." He swallowed, his throat tight. "I realized I felt alive today for the first time in years. Not because of my company or my cars, but because of you. Because you saw something in me I thought was dead." Lila's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her expression remained guarded. "And then you killed it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The moment those men walked in, you became the guy who yelled at me this morning. The guy I hoped you weren't." "You're right," James said, his voice breaking. "I spent years building walls to protect myself, and when I had the chance to choose between those walls and something real, I chose the walls. I chose safety over you. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Why should I believe you?" Lila's voice trembled, but her gaze was unflinching. "You had your chance, James. You showed me exactly who you are." James reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. "This is who I am," he said, showing her the screen, now nearly empty of contacts. "I deleted them. Edward Richard Thomas, my business partner of 10 years. The Singapore deal they were pushing? It's worth $200 million, and I walked away from the meeting to come here. Because nothing is worth more than making this right with you." Lila stared at the phone, then at his face, searching for the truth. "You deleted your business partners?" "I deleted people who couldn't see your worth," James said, his voice growing stronger. "Who couldn't see that you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You challenged me in one day to be better than I've been in years. You made me want to be the man who deserves to stand beside you." A taxi rounded the corner, slowing as it approached. Lila glanced at it, then back at James, her internal struggle etched in every line of her face. "That's Marcus," she said quietly. James's heart shattered, but he nodded. "I understand. If you want me to go, I will." The taxi stopped and Marcus rolled down the window, his face a mix of concern and suspicion. Lila held up a hand. "Marcus, give me 5. "You sure, Z?" Marcus asked, glancing at James. "Yeah," she said, her eyes never leaving James's face. 5 minutes. The taxi pulled away, leaving them under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station entrance. James felt a fragile spark of hope, like a candle in a storm. "Why?" he asked simply. Lila studied him, her gaze piercing. "Because this morning you were a man ruled by fear and prejudice. Tonight, in your garage, I saw someone capable of growth, of connection. But when those men walked in, I saw the scared man again." She took a step closer, her voice softening. "Now, seeing you chase me to Queens, seeing you throw away your precious deal to apologize, I see a man at a crossroads. I need to know which man you're going to choose to be." James met her eyes, seeing not just the pain he'd caused, but the courage she still offered despite it. "I want to be the man who sees you clearly," he said, his voice steady with conviction. "Who celebrates your brilliance, who stands beside you with pride instead of hiding behind cowardice." I want to be worthy of the woman who fixed more than my Ferrari tonight. Lila's eyes glistened, but she held her ground. That's what I want, too, she said. But if I give you this chance, James, I need to know you won't break my heart the next time someone challenges you. Then let me prove it, he said, reaching out slowly, giving her time to pull away. Not with words, but with actions. Every day, for as long as you'll let me. Lila was quiet, her breath visible in the cold November air. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. One chance, she whispered. One real chance. But if you make me feel small again, it's over. Forever. One chance is all I need, James said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her knuckles. I promise to show you that love means becoming who you're meant to be, not hiding who you are. They stood there, hands clasped under the Queen's. Streetlights, the Ferrari gleaming beside them, a symbol of the day's chaos and the fragile hope now taking root. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but in this moment, they'd chosen courage over fear, connection over safety. The city hummed. Around them, unaware that two hearts had just taken the first step toward rebuilding something broken, something real. The February sun poured through the windows of Thompson Auto Restoration in Long Island City, Queens, casting golden light across the workshop's concrete floor. It was Valentine's Day, 2026, and the air buzzed with the hum of tools and the faint scent of motor oil, a symphony of purpose that felt like home. The Ferrari SF90 Stradale, once a symbol of James Carter's isolated wealth, stood at the center of the shop, its scarlet paint gleaming under new decals that read, Thompson Carter Mobile Auto Service. Lila Thompson, in bright red coveralls, adjusted a torque wrench with practiced ease, while James, in matching navy coveralls, handed her a precision tool, his movements steady with newfound skill. The workshop, once Lila's solitary kingdom, was now a shared space, a testament to 3 months of transformation, trust, and love that had turned a painful encounter into something extraordinary. 35 Newton meters, exactly, James said, his voice carrying a reverence once reserved for boardroom victories. Lila smiled, her dark eyes sparkling as she made the final adjustment to the Ferrari's engine. Perfect, she said, sliding out from beneath the car, her curls escaping her bun in a way that made James's heart skip. You're getting good at this, Carter. Not bad for a guy who hadn't touched a wrench in a decade, he replied, his grin boyish, free of the arrogance that had defined him 3 months ago. The man who'd screamed at Lila for touching his Ferrari on Fifth Avenue was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned to listen, to work, to love with his hands as much as his heart. The past 3 months had been a crucible. James had restructured. Carter Tech, replacing toxic board members like Edward Harris with diverse leaders who shared his new vision, a company focused not just on profit, but on ethical AI and social impact. He'd launched a scholarship fund for young women in automotive engineering, personally mentoring 3 students, including a teenager from the Bronx named Mia, who was now interning at Lila's shop. His public apology on X, posted the day after Lila's departure from his garage, had gone viral. Not for its polish, but for its raw honesty. Asterisk, I was wrong to judge someone by their appearance. Lila Thompson taught me that real wealth is in talent, character, and courage. I'm learning to be better. Asterisk, the post had sparked a wave of support, but also criticism from industry peers who saw his shift as weakness. James didn't care. For the first time, he was living for something bigger than himself. Lila, too, had changed. The wall she built around her heart, forged by years of dismissal in a male-dominated industry, had begun to soften. She'd accepted an invitation to speak at the International Auto Tech Summit in Detroit, a milestone she'd nearly declined after James's betrayal. He'd encouraged her, not as a savior, but as a partner, sitting in the audience as she captivated. the room with her expertise on hybrid systems. Her speech, streamed live on X, had earned her a standing ovation and a flood of new clients, including a Formula One team. Yet she remained grounded, her focus on the workshop and the community she served. "Why are we working on Valentine's Day?" James asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer and loved it. Lila wiped her hands on a rag, her grin infectious. "Because some things matter more than candlelit dinners. And because this isn't just a Ferrari anymore." She gestured to the car, now equipped with a custom cooling system hidden in the trunk, designed to carry parts for their new mobile auto service. The idea had been James's, born from watching Lila's eyes light up when she talked about making expert repairs accessible to everyone, not just the elite. He'd funded the project quietly, but insisted on learning the technical side, becoming her partner in every sense. "System test?" Lila asked, moving to the diagnostic computer they'd installed together. "System test," James confirmed, his fingers navigating the interface with growing confidence. The screens lit up, confirming the Ferrari's modifications were flawless. Vehicle now built for purpose, not just prestige. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, Layla's assistant and friend. Asterisk, "If you two don't get out of that shop and act like normal people for Valentine's, I'm staging an intervention." Asterisk Lila laughed, the sound filling the workshop with warmth. "He's got a point. We've been at this for 6 hours. "Worth it," James said, stepping closer, his eyes soft with affection. "There's something about building this with you, something real. I forgot what that felt like. Look at you, getting all philosophical about grease and bolts," Lila teased, but her gaze held a tenderness that matched his. The past 3 months hadn't been without challenges. James had stumbled, his instinct to solve problems with money resurfacing at times. Lila had pulled back, her trust tested by memories of past betrayals. But each time, they'd chosen to lean into the discomfort, talking through fears, learning each other's rhythms like mechanics tuning an engine. The real test had come 6 weeks ago, when Forbes proposed a cover story on their relationship. James's old self would have hidden Lila or used her as a prop for his image. Instead, he'd insisted the story focus on her expertise and the mobile service, casting himself as her student, not her savior. The article, titled Lila Thompson, Rewriting the Rules of Auto Repair, had gone viral, spotlighting her as a trailblazer and their project as a model for community-driven innovation. "You know what I love most about this?" Lila said, running her hand along the Ferrari's sleek hood. 3 months ago, this car was everything that divided us, your wealth, my assumptions about rich people, the way the world pits us against each other. Now it's what brought us together. Passion, respect, getting our hands dirty for something we believe in. James took her hands, unmindful of the grease smudging their fingers. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, his voice husky. "Always," Lila said, her eyes locking with his. "That first day, when I saw you touching my car, I was angry because I thought you didn't belong in my world. I was so wrong." He brought her hands to his chest, over his heart. "You didn't belong in my world. You belonged in a better one, where talent matters more than money, where character outweighs connections. The question was whether I was brave enough to join you." Lila's eyes glistened, her voice soft. "You're learning, James. Every day. You teach me that love isn't about comfort. It's about growth, about seeing people clearly. I have something for you," he said, reaching into his coveralls. "And before you threaten to throw a wrench at me, it's not jewelry." He pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to her. "Read this first." Lila unfolded it, her breath catching as she scanned the official letterhead. "James, this is the deed to the building, the workshop, the apartment upstairs. I bought it from your landlord. he said. "It's yours, free and clear, no matter what happens. Between us, you should never worry about losing this place, your sanctuary, to rent hikes or gentrification. This is where you shine, and the world needs that light." Lila stared at the deed, overwhelmed by its meaning: security, independence, respect. For her legacy. Why? She whispered. "Because my love for you isn't about control," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's about empowering you to be exactly who you are." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a sapphire ring, its deep blue hue reminiscent of motor oil, encircled by tiny diamonds shaped like gear teeth. Dropping to one knee on the workshop floor, he looked up at her. "Lila Thompson, you fix more than my Ferrari. You fix my heart, my perspective, my life. You taught me that real wealth is what you give, not what you keep. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner in every adventure, your student in every lesson, your teammate in changing the world one engine at a time?" Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks, not of sorrow but of joy. She dropped to her knees, taking his face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, her voice ringing with certainty. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." As James slipped the ring onto her finger, the Ferrari's engine gave a soft purr, as if celebrating their union. They laughed, their foreheads touching, the workshop alive with the promise of their future. 6 months later, their wedding took place in the workshop, under an arch of welded car parts, surrounded by clients, friends, and students from their scholarship program. Marcus was Lila's man of honor, while James's best man was Mia, the Bronx intern now bound for MIT. The guest list blended billionaires and mechanics, a testament to their shared mission. The Ferrari, now the flagship of Thompson Carter Mobile Auto Service, carried them to their first call as a married couple, a broken-down school bus full of kids needing to reach a science fair. As they worked side by side, their wedding clothes protected by coveralls, Lila caught James's eye and smiled. "Any regrets?" He looked at her, then at the cheering children, then at the ring on his finger. "Just one," he said, tightening a bolt with perfect precision. "That it took me 38 years to learn that the best things in life are earned, not bought." This story is more than a romance. It's a testament to the power of growth, forgiveness, and the courage to challenge our deepest flaws. James and Lila's journey shows that love isn't just about connection. It's about transformation, about choosing to be better even when it's painful. Their story reflects the real-world struggles of 2025 systemic biases, the weight of privilege, the fight for equity, and reminds us that change begins with seeing others clearly, not through the lens of prejudice or power. It teaches us that second chances, when earned through action, can rebuild what's broken, and that true wealth lies in empowering others. What's your story of growth or redemption? Share it in the comments below. And if this tale moved you, subscribe to Legacy Stories on YouTube for more narratives that inspire, challenge, and remind us of the beauty in becoming our best selves. Hit that button, join our community, and let's keep these stories alive.